the para and then we'll summarize whatever up to now, whatever we have read and understood, and then we'll go through the para which you will read now. Okay. So, oh, we will redo.
Okay, okay. We have to redo it. We have to redo it.
Okay. So in that case, we'll just summarize whatever we have learned up to now. Okay.
Yes, that's necessary.
The chapter is the origin and remedy of falsehood, error, wrong, and evil. So Srivendra starts looking, and the first question that arises is that since the divine is manifesting all the possibilities in himself down into the physical world, or since we see falsehood, error, and distortion, evil, we see all these things in the physical world. Are they there also in potential in the divine eye up there at the supreme source of things? That's a question he asks himself. Then he starts examining. Okay. So remember that Srivendra is a pioneer. When he knew nothing about all these things when he went to England. It was there inherent in him, but he didn't know. So he had to explore. He says that this is a pioneering work that I had to do. So you go up in consciousness and start exploring everything. So now he is giving us the knowledge. The descent of the divine into the physical world, we can call it involution. Okay? But in the involution, there are 2 or 3 laws that operate, and we must remember that. The first law is the one becomes the many. The unity, the oneness of the supreme starts becoming here the multiplicity. But this multiplicity is apparent. It's not real in the ultimate sense. Behind all these forms, the multiple forms that you see, the divine presence is lurking, but it's not seen. Okay? So there is a descent. He calls this a ladder coming down, involution. Then there is the evolution. So since in the evolution, you are starting from consciousness, you are starting from omnipotence, omniscience, there can't be any distortion. So in other words, in this ladder coming down, there is absolutely no falsehood, no error, and no evil. Okay. So now when you are starting, evolution is the ladder that goes up, the parallel ladder. He compares these two to a ladder only. The ladder is his word, his words. So there's an involutionary ladder coming down, and there's an evolutionary ladder going up. Now when you are going up, you are starting from ignorance, inconscience. So if you are ignorant and inconscious, you have to travel a forest, you have to go through a forest, you don't know where to go. So naturally error comes up. So an error in your knowledge will also give you error in action, error in emotions. So the origin of error and all these things, is it there in the inconscient, in potential? There also he says it is not, because it's a blank. There is a blank. But from the inconscient, when matter comes up, and from matter there is the life that comes up, the first element that comes out, the possibility of error comes in, because you don't know where you're going. You have to find out the truth by error, by false steps, then you know what are the right steps. So the origin of evil, suffering, and falsehood and error is in the vital, in the ladder going up. That's where it comes in. In other words, in the divine, there is absolutely no falsehood and no error and no evil at the higher level. These are only results and manifestations of the evolution. They are only results, they are not something fundamental. This question arises because at the highest level you have light, but when it comes down, there is darkness. So the question arises, is darkness a potential in the light itself? The simple answer is very clear, no, it is not. The darkness is a result, it's a consequence of the descent. Okay? So this is, up to now we have come up to this point. Very clearly he has told us. And the discussion is much more, but I am just giving you the summary of what he has said. Okay? So, now I read this. I'll do one thing. The previous paragraph, we'll just have a look at that. And then we'll go on to each sentence that we have to read today. The origin of error, falsehood, and evil is now clear. In the evolution from inconscience upwards, we have the following. A limited consciousness coming from the darkness of inconscience and producing error. Okay, so this is the first one. A wrong consciousness dominated by, just 1 second, I'm still learning how to use my tablet without the keyboard. The limited consciousness coming from the darkness of inconscience and produces error. Number one, error is there. Next, a personal attachment and a clinging to error and limitation and evil. There is a personal attachment that comes in. Okay? Because at the lower level, the stability of forms is important. And what does stability of forms mean? The tamas, principle of tamas. If the tamas is not there, then all forms will be going on changing every second. Then practical life becomes impossible. So there has to be a fixity. And fixity is what attachment becomes in the human being. The law of fixity in the physical world, relative fixity. Nothing is permanent fixed in the physical world. But there is a relative fixity to ensure that practical life is possible. If there's no fixity at all, practical life is not possible. How can I go on talking to someone if he goes on changing his face and his body? So there has to be a fixity. Fixity implies attachment. So there is an attachment. That's what should be saying. Okay, so a personal attachment and a clinging to error and limitation produces falsity. A wrong consciousness dominated by the ego produces evil action and wrong action and evil action. But all these are surface phenomena and certainly have their justification in the evolutionary process. It's very natural to make mistakes. And mistakes in body, you will suffer. Mistakes in the vital also you will suffer. Mistakes in consciousness will give you wrong knowledge. Yes. The rise of the vital ego is nature's device to make firm and strong the individuality which commences from the amorphous, undistributed, infinite expanse of the inconscious. These are my words, huh? Don't look at anything else. The ego is the shadow of the, or the representative in the ignorance of the true being, of the individual. It turns out finally to be a fiction, but in the mutability of the lower existence, it's the most essential and useful tool for firming up the individualization. For fixing the individualization, ego is absolutely necessary. Okay, so that's what he's saying. The ego separates itself from the others and even from its own inner true self. You have completely forgotten who you are. But this is an inevitable stage in the evolutionary process. In the evolutionary process. So, this movement culminates in the cosmic consciousness where, no, one second. In the evolutionary process, that's clear. Then, the function of your true being is, after all, the function of the vital is, after all, to expand, to conquer, possess all, and become master of all. That's a necessity of the vital. The vital's law is that to expand, conquer, possess everything, and become master. And this is exactly the aim of the self, but of course without ignorant separation. The aim is the same for the ego as well as your psychic being. But the psychic being does it purely and the vital does it impurely. That's the whole problem. So, this movement culminates in the cosmic consciousness where unity with all is attained and ego is abolished into non-existence. So, this is what he has said until now. Now I read each sentence and we see whether it's clear. But because it does these things as a separate ego for its separate advantage and not by conscious interchange and mutuality, not by unity, life discord, conflict, disharmony arise. And it is the products of this life discord and disharmony that we call wrong and evil. Here, the vital is the doing everything, trying to possess everything in the universe, but unfortunately, it does it against the universe, not with the universe. If it does it with the universe, there will be harmony. If it does that, but it does not. It works against the universe, only for itself. Therefore, it has to do it against the universe or the world. You can use whatever you want. Okay? It does these things as a separate ego for its separate advantage and not by conscious interchange and mutuality. Conscious interchange and mutuality, remember the fact that you are one with everybody, and the concept of the sacrifice comes in. Srimdo has 80, 90 pages in synthesis about the sacrifice. And what is the sacrifice? Conscious interchange and mutuality. You have to give to receive. That's a basic principle of the sacrifice. Not by unity. The vital doesn't do it by unity. It does it by life discord, conflict, disharmony. This disharmony arises, and it's the products of this life discord and disharmony that we call wrong and evil. But when you go to the spiritual level of consciousness, you don't see it as wrong and evil. You see it only as a result, a natural result. I go to the next sentence. Nature accepts them, whatever they are. Whether they are results or whether they are really wrong and evil, nature accepts them because they are necessary circumstances of the evolution. Necessary for the growth of the divided being. They are products of ignorance, supported by an ignorant consciousness that founds itself on division, by an ignorant will that works through division, by an ignorant delight of existence that takes joy of division. So this is the vital. Okay. So I read that sentence carefully again. Nature accepts them. Nature, individually your body, mind, life, and nature in the universal view, it is matter, life, and mind. Nature accepts them because they are necessary circumstances of the evolution. You have to make a mistake to know what is the right. Okay? That's why. You have to know what is evil to know what is not evil. So therefore, they are necessary. They are necessary circumstances. Necessary for the growth of the divided being. For the growth of the divided being. Okay? But the growth of the undivided being is different. That's from the spiritual plane of consciousness onwards. They are products of ignorance, supported by an ignorant consciousness that founds itself on division, by an ignorant will that works through division, by an ignorant delight of existence that takes the joy of division. In other words, you are wanting knowledge, you are wanting power, you are wanting also joy, but everything based on the ego. The evolutionary intention acts through the evil. Just one second. The evolutionary intention acts through the evil as through the good. There are dualities that exist in the physical world. Remember that duality is a very important principle in the physical world. Dualities don't exist when you go up to the spiritual levels of consciousness. To everything that you see in the physical world, there is an equal and opposite real. Okay, they are all valid. If opposites were not there, you would have a tendency to stagnate. Okay? Because there is evil and you recognize it as such, you want to go to that which is good. Because there is ignorance, you are goaded to go towards knowledge. Okay? That's what the necessity is because of that. It has to utilize what is the evolutionary intention. The evolutionary intention has to utilize all because confinement to a limited good would imprison and check the intended evolution. See, so clear. If there is only good, progress would not be possible. That's what he's saying. The evolutionary intention acts through the evil as through the good. Both have to be there. It has to utilize all, both good and evil, because confinement to a limited good, not the ultimate good, but imprison and check the intended evolution. So clear. It uses this, we don't see. What Siddhartha is saying here, we don't see at this level. But when you go to the higher level, you see, oh, evil, ignorance also have their functions in the physical world. That you see. Because he has seen, he gives us the knowledge. It has to utilize all, because confinement to a limited good would imprison and check the intended evolution. It uses any available material and does what it can with it. This is the reason why we see evil coming out of what we call good and good coming out of what we call evil. Okay? There are many, many things, but the other day we discussed now, there is only one very clear, you can find many, many examples where good coming out of evil and evil coming out of good. So we discussed other day the colonization. No? In fact, history is Europe, when colonizing the rest of the world, is one of the very, very most important phenomena in history, because once it ended, the whole thing changed altogether. And why was this colonization necessary? Because Europe had, to a certain extent, physically, little more knowledge than the others, physically, and they had to give that to the rest where there was stagnation. So, Sherda mentioned this in the synthesis also, if you remember. The country which had so much of civilization and so much of spiritual knowledge had to be conquered by the British, so that the progressive mind, he uses the word progressive mind. Science is using the word progressive mind, had to be again inculcated into the Indian ethos. So you can see very clearly that the colonization was evil in itself. It was greedy, it was destructive of the cultures, and it was only for their own benefit that they did. Evil at its supreme level, colonization. But it did produce some good. It united India politically. It also brought in the railway system. It brought in also an administration which was not there. 650 princely states had to be integrated into a nation which was culturally one, always, but never politically one. Never. 650 states. That great work was done by our Vallabhbhai Patel. Not Nehru, huh? Vallabhbhai Patel. So, one example only we gave about the good becoming evil and evil becoming good. There's constantly interaction between the two, and the evolution takes place through this interaction between good and evil. You can also give examples of other things. When a flood comes, you consider it evil, but when it goes back, the flood recedes, it leaves the alluvial soil on the plain and it enriches the soil. So like that, you can give many, many forest fires also. It seems to destroy, but it gives a new life to the forest. New life comes up. So this is just examples. We can think of so many examples where good produces evil and evil produces good. And if we see even what was thought to be evil coming to be accepted as good, what was thought to be good accepted as evil, it is because our standards of both are evolutionary, limited and mutable. One good example of this in recent times is, we were, it's a little touchy subject, but I'll go because it's very, very clear. Okay. Homosexuality was considered a crime in the West. In India, we did not give too much importance to it, but there was definitely a shunning. Now we have realized that it is something biological. So you don't consider it a sin anymore. You have changed your attitude to things. That's exactly what Sridhar is saying. See, one very prominent example is what has happened today. Recently, it has happened. This is the reason why we see evil coming out of what we call good and good coming out of what we call evil. And If we see even what was thought to be evil, there you are, coming to be accepted as good, what was thought to be good, accepted as evil, it is because our standards of both are evolutionary, limited and mutable. Evolutionary nature, terrestrial, that's the next sentence, sorry. Evolutionary nature, terrestrial, the terrestrial cosmic force seems then at first to have no preference for either of these opposites. It uses both alike for its purpose. Okay. Good and evil, falsehood and truth. And yet, it is the same nature, the same force that has burdened man with the sense of good and evil and insists on its importance. Evidently, therefore, this sense also has an evolutionary purpose. So, the sense of good and evil. He has just now told us that good and evil are not what we think it to be. It is something, it's a result of the evolution. But we have a sense of what is good and what is evil. Okay? That sense, he's saying, also is necessary. And yet it is the same nature, the same force that has burdened man with the sense of good and evil, burdened man, okay, and insists on its importance. Evidently, therefore, this sense also has an evolutionary purpose. It too must be necessary. It must there, it must be there so that man may live certain so that man may live, where is it gone? Sorry, my page. What's the page there? 647, no?
647. This one is on 648.
Oh, 240. Okay, so it behind moves towards others until out of good and evil it can emerge into some good that is eternal and infinite. In the physical world, we have the relative good and relative evil, and it comes out of that, and then the evil disappears in your view, you start seeing, and good that becomes eternal and infinite, you get that. This is what he's saying. Very interesting. This is clear what he's saying. That he's giving you the idea, and also this is connected with the sense of morality. Morality at our level is absolutely essential because you have to distinguish between good and evil. But when you go to the higher level, you see that moral values are very temporarily useful and good also at the lower level. But when you go up, you find that it is not exactly what you thought it to be. There are other values which are something much more, then much more valuable and much more valid also. So now we can go to the next paragraph. How is this evolutionary intention to fulfill itself? By what means? Impulsion. So somebody has to read. Who will read? Usually Archana reads. Does she have the text? She may not be there. Okay, you'd like to read?
Shall I read, Rangada?
Yes, please go ahead.
But how is this evolutionary intention in nature to fulfill itself? By what powers, means, impulsion? What principle and process of selection and harmonization? The method adopted by the mind of man through the ages has been always a principle of selection and rejection, and this has taken the forms of a religious sanction, a social or moral rule of life, or an ethical ideal. But this is an empirical means which does not touch the root of the problem because it has no vision of the cause and origin of the malady it attempts to cure. It deals with the symptoms, but deals with them perfunctorily, not knowing what function they serve in the purpose of nature and what it is in the mind and life that supports them and keeps them in being. Moreover, human good and evil are relative and the standards erected by ethics are uncertain as well as relative. What is forbidden by one religion or another? What is regarded as good or bad by social opinion? What is thought useful to society or noxious to it? What some temporary law of man allows or disallows? What is or is considered helpful or harmful to self or others? What occurs with this or that ideal? What is prompted or discouraged by an instinct which we call conscience? An amalgam of all these viewpoints is the determining heterogeneous idea constitutes the complex substance of morality. In all of them, there is constant mixture of truth and half-truth and error, which pursues all the activities of our limiting mental knowledge ignorance. A mental control over our vital and physical desires and instincts, over our personal and social action, over our dealing with others is indispensable to us as human beings, and morality creates a standard by which we can guide ourselves and establish a customary control. But the control is always imperfect and it is the expedient, not a solution. Man remains always what he is and has ever been, a mixture of good and evil, sin and virtue, a mental ego with an imperfect command over his mental, vital, and physical nature.
Yeah. Okay, so now the next question arises, evolutionary ascent is okay, but what does nature use as instruments to achieve its purpose? That's the whole thing. So now since we're discussing this, evolutionary is okay, but how does it manage to evolve out of this situation? Okay, we read each sentence carefully. Okay, how is this evolutionary intention in nature to fulfill itself? Srivno's very favorite word is fulfill itself. Now, so fulfill itself. What is fulfillment? The satisfaction of your aim, a complete satisfaction of your aim is fulfillment. And in the physical world, you have a body, you have a vital, and you have a mind. And the others are rejecting all this. The Mayavadins and the Buddhists are rejecting all this body-mind life because they think that it is permanently defective and full of evil and suffering. So they reject it. But Srivna has told us that the physical world is also the divine, the Advaita philosophy. We have started from the Advaita philosophy. So we can't throw it away. We have to. So how does this fulfillment of the body, what is it? So Srivna says the fulfillment of the body would be freedom from illness, freedom from ill health, and freedom from death, even death. Okay? That would be the fulfillment for the body. What about the fulfillment of the vital? What does the vital want? It wants satisfaction and bliss. At our level, that bliss becomes pleasure, but that is what it wants. So the vital would be fulfilled if it gets bliss, ananda, pure ananda without any idea of free of desire, attachment, and ego. That would be the fulfillment for the vital. What about the fulfillment of the mind? What is the mind's role? The mind is wanting knowledge. So therefore, when the ignorance disappears and the mind becomes absolutely full of light and knowledge, that would be the fulfillment of the mind. So now this is what he's asking. How does it do it? But how is this evolutionary intention in nature to fulfill itself? Fulfill what? Fulfill nature itself. Okay? Nature has to fulfill her role in the physical world. By what power? What is the instrumentation used? What are the means? The impulsion. What principle and process of selection and harmonization? The method adopted, now he's answering. The method adopted by the mind of man through the ages has been always a principle of selection and rejection. Even the animal does that. Okay, so it's something he's saying, the method adopted by the mind of man, but it starts even at the animal level. It selects and rejects. And this has taken the forms of a religious sanction, a social or moral rule of life, or an ethical idea. So morality is a first step towards the ascent. And it is valid. The method that takes the form of a religious sanction, a social or moral code of life, or an ethical idea. But this is an empirical means, practical, empirical means, by which it does not touch the root of the problem, because there is no vision of the cause and origin of the malady it attempts to cure. So, it's doing it in ignorance. It deals with the symptoms, but deals with them perfunctorily, very summarily, very superficially, not knowing what function they serve in the purpose of nature. So, selection and rejection. So rejection should not be there. That's what he's saying, because they don't know the purpose. What you are rejecting also has a purpose in nature. And what it is in the mind and life that supports them and keeps them in being. So what is there in mind and life? In mind, there is the inherent possibility of knowledge. In the life, there is the inherent possibility of enjoyment, proper enjoyment, that supports them and keeps them in being. Actually, it's the psychic being behind which is supporting the mind and the vital. Keeps them going, keeps them in being. Moreover, human good and evil are relative. What is forbidden by one religion or another, my computer is jumping.
And the standards selected by
Moreover, humans are relative, and the standards erected by ethics are uncertain as well as relative. What is forbidden by one religion or another, what is regarded as good or bad by social opinion, what is thought useful to society or noxious to it, what some temporary law of man allows or disallows, what is or is considered helpful or harmful to self and others, what accords with this or that ideal, what is prompted or discouraged by an instinct which you call conscience. An amalgam of all these viewpoints is the determining heterogeneous idea, constitutes a complex substance of morality. So, fantastic sentence, but to be able to, we get the basic idea. But if you want to study Sridhar's language, you have to go through each phrase and see what he's saying. Okay, so and his sentences are so complex, that's why you have to go through each phrase and give yourself examples of what he's saying. Okay, so what's the time? 33. We have got 7 minutes. So we'll go through. We won't be able to finish it, but we'll go through as much as we can. So, moreover, I'm going from moreover. Okay. Moreover, human good and evil are relative. What we think is good and what we think is evil is not necessarily so. The standards erected and the standards erected by ethics, morality, okay, are uncertain as well as relative. They are uncertain as well as relative. Mind you, even some relatives can be certain for the time being, but they are uncertain as well as relative. What is forbidden by one religion or another, what is regarded as good or bad by social opinion. So we go step by step. So what is regarded as good or bad by, good or bad by, what is forbidden by one religion or another. Okay, Islam, you are to kill all those who are not accepting Allah. But the other religions say no, killing is bad. So there you are, okay. Already there is a difference of opinion between the religions. Then through Christianity, you have to go only through Christ. You can't get to the higher levels of consciousness without going through Christ. So they reserve the problem, they reserve the right to convert people. That's one of the main principles of the church. They have the right to convert people. Okay? But in our India, it is exactly the opposite. Let everybody do what they want and go as they want. Each one is free to choose his own path. Exactly the opposite. So we've got two examples of what one religion is forbidding and the other is allowing. Okay. Next phrase. What is regarded as good or bad by social opinion. That again is something totally different. One society will think what is good and another society will think what is bad. Okay. So take the monogamy and polygamy. Okay. That's another example of what is in some societies they will think it's quite natural. There's nothing wrong with it. And it's also in some others they'll think it is very bad. Okay. So differences of opinion between religions and social ideas. Regarded as good or bad by social opinion. What is thought useful to society or noxious to it, harmful to it. What some temporary law of man allows or disallows. What is or is considered helpful or harmful to self or others. What accords with this or that ideal. What is prompted or discouraged by an instinct which we call conscience. An amalgam of all these viewpoints is the determining heterogeneous idea, constitutes a complex substance of morality. So morality is all these mixture of good, bad, all sorts of ideas and all sorts of theories and all, which is absolutely a mixture, okay, total mixture. This is morality. In all of them, there is a constant mixture of truth and half-truth and error, which pursues all the activities of our limiting mental knowledge ignorance. Level 1, there is always knowledge and ignorance, both together always, all the time. A mental control over our vital and physical desires and instincts, over our personal and social action, over our dealings with others, is indispensable to us as human beings. And morality creates a standard by which we can guide ourselves and establish a customary control. The word customary, Srila uses in the sense of habit, okay, in the sense of habit. Okay. Habit. But the control is always imperfect and it is an expedient, not a solution. An expedient is a temporary solution. That which is expedient, you resort to something which is okay for the time being. That's an expedient, not a solution. Man remains always what he is and has ever been, a mixture of good and evil, sin and virtue, a mental ego with an imperfect command of over his mental, vital and physical nature. This question he has dealt with in great detail in that chapter, the standards of conduct. Remember? So he has pointed out all the defects of the morality. Okay, so very interesting discussion there in the synthesis. So this is what he's saying. So we still not found out what is the means that evolutionary nature is using to rise up. The first one is mind, mental, the mind of man. Okay. But the mind of man, he has pointed out all the defects. So what is the next one? We'll have to see. The endeavor to select, to retain, the next paragraph, from our consciousness and action, all that seems to us good and reject all that seems to us as bad, I suppose. Okay. So, yeah. Anyway, we have to stop here today. It's time to stop. So, he is now examining the means that nature is using to ascend the evolutionary ladder. So, we'll have to see one by one. Okay. So, I went very rapidly through this time without any questions and discussions. Maybe I should have slowed down a little bit. But is it okay? Yasmin, you want to say something?
No, nothing.
Okay.
Just merci beaucoup.
Okay. Merci. Au revoir, everybody. Have a nice day and see you tomorrow. We'll continue from here tomorrow. The endeavor to select, to retain that consciousness.
Thank you. Au revoir.
Tomorrow I'll bring my book. I thought it is okay, but it's not okay, my tablet.
Rangana.
Okay.
Thank you, Rangana.